Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am going to be working on some fall projects today because we're officially in fall. I'm going to be using some air dry clay, but before I get into my projects today, I wanted to say a big thank you to my subscribers. I'm at 4,000 subscribers now, which is a huge achievement for me on my YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for your comments and your support through this channel journey with me. And I just love making things and sharing it with people. So if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and give me some feedback. I love hearing from you and maybe taking some advice from my viewers, what you learned through your crafting journey, kind of working on some things together. So I love that part of it and getting to know all of you. So for my clay, this I picked up from Amazon, and it's actually, I think, kids clay. It looks like it's similar to Crayola clay, but I got it for a pretty good deal, and it has these individual packages, which I really liked. I didn't know how much of this clay I was going to be using at one time, and I didn't want it to dry out. So I thought this was a manageable amount of clay. I did flatten out a piece of my clay, and I used just an acrylic roller and two flat pieces that I got from a clay kit. If I can find the kit, I will link it in the description as well as the clay. But I am trying to jelly print on top of my little piece of clay here. I do want this piece to remain white, but I added some glitter. This is just holographic glitter, and I just wanted to have a nice thin even coat of this without having to brush it on. So I thought this was a great way to transfer all this glitter onto my clay piece. Then I have an empty bottle of golden fluid acrylic paint, and I have a styrofoam ball that I'm using to kind of shape a little ghost. I wanted to work on the head first, but then I realized this little piece of styrofoam was actually a bit too big for the size ghost I was making, and the paint container ended up being a better size. So I did remove that from the styrofoam and used the paint bottle instead. And I'm just shaping it to whatever size this is. I didn't cut out a perfect circle. I've seen some tutorials where you use like a cookie cutter and you make the exact circle and then you start doing this process. I just decided to kind of go for it, and then I was going to trim off anything that was like a little bit too long or too big. So again, just kind of pressing in to the head area, and then once I put it on my desk, I can see where the parts are too big and I can just cut it off with my craft knife. I do want it to lay fairly flat, but I also want it to have a little bit of like wrinkling so it looks like cloth. So I'm just kind of messing with it until I get it to look kind of like the ghost that I'm envisioning in my head. And I did want my little ghost to have some little hands. This clay it's kind of foamy. It doesn't end up drying like really hard. So I didn't end up putting anything in his hand or her hand. I just put the little hands out there. So it kind of looks like the ghost is trying to give someone a hug when the two hands are on. And to apply the hand, I just stuck it where I wanted it, and then I used this little metal piece and then the back of my nail to kind of smooth it out. It was kind of working, but it's still kind of bulky, so I used some water to help me flatten the piece of clay and kind of merge it into the new piece of clay. And I did the same thing for the other side with the other hand, and just kind of smoothing it out until it kind of looks like it's going to stay. For the eyeballs, I just took a paper piercer and stuck it in the clay and then kind of swirled it around to make little ovals. At first I had little circles, but I think the ghosts are real cute with oval eyes, so I kind of went up and down until I got some cute little ovals. And that's all I used for the cutout for this ghost. I did use some water around the base of it to, again, smooth out any areas that weren't super smooth. Now I did have a vision that I wanted this ghost to be glowy. So I have this little tea light candle. I also got these from Amazon. They work with a remote control. And you can recharge these little tea light candles, which I love. And I just made it so that this little ghost can fit right over one of those candles. And it's got kind of like a flickering flame to it, which I think is so cute. And especially with some colored lights in the background, I think this ghost is adorable. And I just love the two little glowy eyes. The air-dried clay takes 2 days to cure, so 48 hours. I ended up testing mine in 48 hours. It was 2 days later, and it was kind of hard, as in I couldn't like manipulate it anymore, but just be cautious because the clay isn't super hard, so it can break. So if you try to bend something like an opposite way, it will definitely break because then it's more like styrofoam. So I just had to be careful with this medium because I was learning it, and I didn't want to break anything that I was making. So if you're using air dried clay for the first time, I would just caution you that if you want something flat, make it flat before it dries. And yeah, it's a little bit of a learning curve. So I'm making a little figurine here, a pumpkin, and the figurines do pretty well with air dry clay. Once I figure out how the medium works, it does kind of, I don't know, it's foamy, so it kind of flexes back on itself, and you have to kind of apply some pressure to get the impression that you're wanting. And when it dries, it kind of puffs up a little bit, which isn't a bad thing. Again, it's just learning the medium, and I'm sure air dried clays are not all the same. If you used maybe a higher end air dried clay, it might have either more or less flexibility. I don't know. This is my first time working with air dry clay, so I'm just playing. I'm not sure what to expect. So I did use water because I read online that you could smooth out some rough edges with some water. And then at the top of it where the stem would go, I just used a little silicone brush, squished it in, and just kind of made it blend into the little grooves of the pumpkin. It's quite easy to do, and it is pretty fun, especially if you're just doing this as a kind of casual fun thing. This little metal piece definitely was helpful to smooth out weird rough edges. And I had gotten this for my regular clay back in the day. To make this into something that I can hang it from, I used a head pin. I have head pins and eye pins. I'm going to use the flat one today. So I just stuck it through the bottom of the pumpkin and all the way through the top. It was a little tricky because it didn't want to go straight in, but I did the best that I could. And again, if you're going to do something like this, my recommendation is don't try messing with the top of the head pin until your pumpkin is at least 48 hours cured. I ended up trying to turn the top into a little a rounded, like a hook, a little too soon, and I probably should have waited a little bit longer for it to cure. So another way of flattening my clay was just to take my little acrylic piece here and just kept spinning it and pressing it down, and then I can use my roller against those two pieces to get a nice even flat piece. And I'm going to jelly print on this one. I have some green and yellow and I'm going to use the golden fluid acrylics because I want this to be layers on this print, and I want these colors to have nice fall colors to them. My first layer with green, I'm going to put some real leaves down. These are oak leaves, and just pressing down the texture on some tissue paper, and all I want is the leaf, I guess, outline and like the veins. I let that layer dry, and then I use some azo gold and some cadmium yellow, and then I've mixed in a little bit of my alizarin crimson and some of my iridescent bright gold. I know this is a lot of paint. I was trying to add all my colors, so I definitely didn't need to add this much paint. So if you're working on this yourself, you can definitely probably do a third of what I did in paint. So I do brayer these off onto a magazine piece that I end up using for projects like envelopes. Then I took this little piece of drywall tape and I'm just running it down the jelly print just to get a little bit of a texture. And I'm only going to be jelly printing this little center area. And so I'll use my tissue paper so that I'm able to really press in. It's a little bit tricky getting the clay off of the jelly plate at first. I tried it two ways. One way I had let it dry on a practice one. I found that it was easier if I did not let the clay dry all the way. So I just left it on for about 2 minutes and then pulled it up. Of course, it doesn't pull up everything on the plate that way because I didn't let it dry. I'm not sure how well it would do if you put it on a jelly plate and let it like air dry completely until it was hard. I'm sure it would do fine, but I wanted to do multiple layers on this clay piece, so I was fine with building up my colors and my layers. So I'm putting down another layer of some kind of orangey colors or orange tones, and I am going to remove a lot of this paint with this is just a cardstock that was embossed to give it a design. And I'll put my piece of clay right over the top. I'm just layering it on top of that first piece. And these golden fluid acrylic paints, they're fairly transparent, so they do layer on top of each other nice. You can still see that green layer, even though this is layered right on top. Next, I added a layer of just yellow, and I did use another one of my textured embossing folder pieces, just so that I can remove some of that paint. And I wanted one more layer with some gold over the top, so I'm using the iridescent bright gold. And I have this little piece that it was a leftover piece of my air dry clay, and I had stuck it into a resin mold of a leaf, and it kind of acts like a stamp once it's dry. So this had dried or cured for about a day and a half by the time I was able to stamp with it. I carefully removed it from the jelly plate, and I thought it looked so cool with all the different layers, and I was happy that I could still see that first green layer. So I let it dry until the paint was no longer wet, but I didn't want my clay to be completely dry. So I probably maybe waited 10 minutes and then started doing my little leaf shapes. These are just little, I think they're cookie cutters, but for me, they were meant for using my polymer clay with them. That's what I had them, was in my polymer clay stash. And I found that the stickiness from the air dry clay was kind of affecting the shape, so I used this cornstarch, and it helped make it so that the shapes will remove from the cookie cutters really nice. So these are some fall shapes that came in this little set that I thought were really cute, and it's a nice way to use this piece of clay that has been jelly printed on top of. Now you will notice the sides of these are still white as well as the back of it, so that's where I'm gonna get creative with what I want to do there. I did poke little holes where all the little stems are. And I'll show you what I'm going to turn these into. And I did let these dry after I had all the holes. I let them dry probably a few more minutes to become a little bit more solid. I think I maybe waited 30 minutes or an hour just so that they weren't as squishy anymore. They weren't completely solid all the way through though, but I did use this gold paint marker to kind of fill in those white edges. And then I also used some of that gold marker to draw in some of the lines on the leaves. And here are my completed little pieces that have the little gold accents on them. And I'm going to set those aside to dry. Next, I'm going to show you some more fun clay ideas. Again, these aren't really jelly printed, but I had all this clay and I was having fun. So for those of you that want to stick around and see what else you could make with some air dry clay, here are some ideas. I have this piece of, I think this is actually from the cake department in Michael's, and it was on sale. That you're supposed to use with fondant or something. I used this to create a little, almost like a sweater looking pumpkin. So I just used one of those cookie cutters again. And I have these little pins. So I used the E6000 glue on the back. And keep in mind, this is not dry yet. It's not cured. So I did stick that on, and I was able to put a little piece of my clay over the top of it. And I just want it to cure like this. So I'm not messing with this little thing until it dries. And then I've got some more resin little molds here. These are two little, I think these are supposed to be a set of earrings of some gnomes. So I thought they were kind of cute, and I hadn't used these yet. So this was my way of testing out to see if you could use these molds on this air dried clay. It is a little tricky. I had to use a lot of the cornstarch in order to release the mold. Otherwise it just pulled right out like gummy glue. So you do have to use a lot of the cornstarch in order for this part to work. And then what I did is I took extra, and then whatever was left over, I just used my craft knife to kind of peel away any of the extra clay. And you'll notice this clay has a little bit of color to it. What I did was I took what was left over from the clay that I had jelly printed with, and I mixed it into a ball, and then it had this kind of nice speckly look to it, which I thought was nice just on its own, but I did end up coloring over these once they were dry. So I have this other leaf and a little leaf shapes that I think I picked this one up at Joann's, and it was for chocolates. So I thought I'd make a couple of little leaves here. And for these, I'm going to turn them into earrings. I just made a little ball and kind of put it into my mold and squished it into all the little corners. And if there was any leftover, like sticking out, then I would just use my craft knife to get rid of any of those extra little pieces. Since these are going to be earrings, I did use my paper piercer again to make some holes. And I had to keep in mind a jump ring has to go through these, so I did have to get them kind of close to the edge, but I want them to be stable and not break, so it is a little bit tricky knowing where to put the little hole. My little stamp piece, I ended up just using some acrylic paint markers just to color it in. And then I wanted to show you how I colored my little gnomes. Since there were two of them, I practiced with one. I liked how it turned out, so I'll show you what I did. I actually used my alcohol markers. Most of these are Prismacolor alcohol markers, but I have a couple of different brands. Some of them are from Hobby Lobby and some are from Michael's. And to start, I'll do this one the same way I did my other one. I used a peach color for the nose and the little hands. Then I used a really light pale yellow, and I made this whole little body that yellow color. Then I have kind of a light brown, and I'm just using that right over the top of his little beard. And then I bring in a little bit of a darker brown, the sienna brown, and give it a little bit more definition. I'm trying to leave the center not colored in so that could be the light part. And I'll bring in another layer of some orange, and the orange is going to be, it's actually a goldenrod color. It's kind of an orangey yellow. And I'm just kind of using this to tie all of that together, and then my cream color is what I'll use to color in the center, and that's the highlight. And I'm just kind of blending those browns and the yellows. Next I have Marigold. This is a nice pretty orange color, and I'm going to use this as his kind of shirt and whatever outfit he's wearing color. And then I have some chestnut brown for his feet. For the hat, I'm using some purple. It's actually ultramarine, but it looks like purple to me. And I'm just using this for my shadows. So just at the top of the part of the hat that's closest to the head. And then I'm bringing in some of my crimson red, and I'm going right over the purple so it doesn't look like it's purple. It looks like it's a dark red color. On the red, I do bring that red all the way up to the top of the hat, but I leave the opening again in the center. First, I'll add in some of my marigold and then some yellow, and the yellow is just going to be the highlight. And it's almost the same. All I need to do is add a little bit of chunky gold glitter, and I used that with a silicone brush. I only put the glitter on the hat, so to cover or protect the rest of the body, I do end up later using I have a spray sealer, but you could use a paint-on sealer or whatever you like. But because it is alcohol and it is alcohol reactive, I would definitely recommend sealing something like this, especially if you are going to wear these or gift them to someone. I did have some yellows and oranges that I used for these little pretty leaf shapes. So these will have more of a yellow hue to them. And I start with my lightest colors and then kind of work my way up to the darker colors. Then I go back in with my light colors to blend those colors together. I felt like these needed a little more definition in the center where the veins were, so I put a little bit of red and then I used my yellow to blend that back out. I used some yellow along the edges and along the back, and a little bit of orange just to give it an ombre or a gradient. And I used that same chunky gold glitter over the front and the side of this little leaf. I followed the same steps for my maple leaf, only this time I used darker colors, more like oranges and my red, just to give this one a little bit more bold color. Going back to the little pieces that I cut out with my cookie cutters, I'm using some chalkboard paint on the back of them. So this is just black chalkboard paint. And I'm turning the back sides of these into little mini chalkboards that you can write on. And coming back to my pumpkin, while those are drying, I thought I would color this guy in also with my alcohol markers. I thought they did such a good job on my little leaves that I wanted to try it on a 3D pumpkin shape. So I started with a really light orange, used my red to come in for the grooves, the shadows. You could pull in a purple or a blue at this stage, which I think would have looked really nice, but I just stuck with these colors. And then I just started bringing in my orange color, then the yellow, and the final color in the middle is kind of like the peach color. It comes together really quickly because you're not other than that first layer where I colored it all in. These little pieces, they fill in pretty quickly, and I thought it went by pretty quick. So it went looking like this to looking like that. And it only took me about maybe 15 minutes for the whole pumpkin to color it in. So that wasn't so bad, and I was having a good time doing it. I thought it looked really nice. I do need to let that cure, but here I had tried to make this little shape out of my piece of head pin at the top, and I probably should have let this dry a little bit longer because it started shifting at the bottom of the pumpkin, and that's why I kind of stopped once I had a hook. I realized I couldn't go all the way around and get a loop until this had cured all the way because I could see it shifting. But even with the hook, I can hook it onto some leaves or hang it from something. So then on this little pin that I made of the pumpkin that looks like it's got some sweater texture to it, I did a light orange color all the way around the edge of it. And then for the center of it, I blended it in with, it's called eggshell, which is a really nice, just like a cream color. And you could have just left it alone because I thought that looked nice as well, but I thought it would look really neat to add some color over this fun texture just to give it a little bit more of a pop. Now that my chalkboard pieces have dried, I can prime them with my piece of chalk. So all you do is you rub some chalk over the back of it. By the way, I did use 3 layers of the chalkboard paint to get it nice and thick. And then you just rub it off, or you can use a microfiber cloth that looks even better because it definitely rubs all that chalk away. And then you can write on it. So I can either use this piece of chalk, no problem, and I can rub it right off, perfect. Or what I like to use instead is a chalk marker. And these, they go on like a marker and they look more bold, like you can see them better and they're easier to write with. But then when they dry, you can erase them with water and a microfiber cloth. So I'm making these into little pieces that you can put over your cups. They're really for stem cups, any kind of a wine glass or a stem glass. So I just used a little binder clip and these little jump rings to attach them. And so here I can erase it and rewrite over and over on these. And these are great if you're having a little dinner party with some friends, or if you have Thanksgiving and you have some company coming over or family. You can give everyone one of these with their initials on the back. And then you can erase them and they can be used for your next set of guests. So to use them, you just take any kind of stemware and then you open up your little binder clip and you just clip it around it. And then you have a cute little decoration for your cups, and your guests can walk around with their drink and set it down and not worry about forgetting which glass was theirs. So I thought these were really fun. And then to make these little leaves into jewelry, little earrings, all I did was I took some jump rings that were big enough to go through. I just closed it up with 2 pliers. Then I added another jump ring. And to that jump ring, I added my earring piece. You can use whatever kind of earring piece that you like, but I like these little hooks. And that's such a simple way to turn these lightweight clay pieces into cute little pieces of jewelry. These would be really fun to wear through the holiday season. I love the colors. Of course, they look like fall to me, and I love the functionality of all of these. I could definitely wear my pin or look at my little ghosty when he's sitting in my decor. I just love that his little eyes kind of flicker with the candle light. And of course, the jewelry will go well throughout the season. So I had so much fun making these. The little pumpkin, I had fun coloring that one and just creating it and just seeing what I could make with these air dry clay little packages. So I'm definitely, here's a little closer look at what these look like, all completed. And you can make as many of these as you like. They're really easy to put together. These little earrings, of course, they shine with the little gold that I put over the top of them. And I've got my little pin here that I can wear over my shirt. And then these little gnomes that I think just look adorable. And they're kind of different but the same. So I colored them the same so they look more similar. My little ghosty, so this little tea light candle, it kind of looks like a real flame. And so I'll show you the remote. It has a timer on it, a 4 and 8 hour timer. You can make it a solid little light, or you could make it a candle light where it flickers. I'll turn the light off so you can see. So again, you can just turn it off and you can turn it on. You can set a timer. You can have a solid light, or you can have the candle flickering. And there's also an option to make it brighter or more dim. I don't know why you would want to make these more dim. The brighter the better. So I made mine as bright as can be. And I just think it's so cute. This is definitely my favorite little project that I made. And I love it next to the little pumpkin, although it's as big as this little ghost. But I still think the colors on this one are really fun, and it was really fun to kind of make it look like a pumpkin. And yeah, so those are my little projects. This little guy here, I just wrote Hello Fall on the back of it just to kind of finish it out, make it look complete. So yeah, I hope you had fun watching these little projects come together, and I hope they inspire you to maybe try something with some air dry clay if you have some on hand, or if you pick some up, it's pretty inexpensive. Let me know what was your favorite project to make with the air dry clay, or have you made one that you enjoy that I didn't show in this video? I would love to hear your ideas. Thank you for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video. In the meantime, happy crafting, y'all!